Retailers are going to be given a chance to present their plan of action for the next 5 years. And they will be faced with a quick set of rapid-fire questions from our experts. Who are the experts? I hear you all cry. Well, Mohammad Iqbal from Alawi is going to be asking the questions. The CEO of Red's Real Estate Development for KSA. Anurag Bajpai, the head of retail for KPMG, one of our experts. Hozefa Saylawala is also going to be there, director of sales for Zebra Technologies. And Amitabh Taneja, the chairman of Images Group, will also be asking the questions. The plan of action for the panel, and it's powered by Zebra Technologies. Now, Zebra Technologies provide better visibility through industry-tailored end-to-end solutions that intelligently connect people, assets, and data to help its customers make business-critical decisions by optimizing workflows through operations. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists who are going to be joining us onto the stage. We have Ashish Panjabi, the COO of Jacky's Retail, and Tom Harvey, the GM of Spinneys. Please, if you could join us on the stage. And giving you a guide through this session and talking you through how it's all going to work, Shruti Nair, would you please come and join us back onto the stage? Gentlemen and lady.
Thank you very much, Lee, for that introduction. We have Ashish Panjabi joining us here on stage. He's the COO of Jacky's Retail, and we have Tom Harvey also joining us. So I thought I'll just be here right now to give you a quick explanation of this segment, right? So it's a new segment that we've started where the two retailers present here, the operations heads of Spinneys and of Jacky's Retail, they're going to talk about their plan of action for the next 5 years of what they plan on implementing and integrating into their operations. We're hoping you're going to give us some specifics, but let's see what they come up with. And at the end of their presentation, we have a panel of experts. Like Lee mentioned, we have Anurag Bajpai, head of retail at KPMG, Mohammad Iqbal Alawi, CEO of Red's Real Estate Development, and we have Hozefa Saylawala, director of sales at Zebra. So that's what's going to happen. And also, if all of you all have questions, the attendees have questions, please make a note of it, and we will give you a chance to answer or ask those questions later, right at the end of the segment. So over to you now, I think. So I think, Tom, if you can start with your plan of action for the next 5 years, we'd love to hear.
Okay, thank you. This feels a little bit like sort of Trump versus Biden.
I know.
A little bit strange. Thank you very much for asking me to join you today, Shruti. For us, the plan really starts from being, I know a lot of people have talked about COVID today and how it's completely transformed their business. On the food side, we were pretty busy. And I think COVID for us really just reinforced what we need to do. And that really starts for us with understanding as a supermarket what our role is for our customers, why they shop with us, what purpose we fulfill for them. And that's actually for us now very much thinking about a world beyond just retail, and thinking about food, and thinking about how, after the initial panic buying, actually, we still sustained an enormous level of strong sales growth because our competitive set's a lot bigger than we thought. It's hotels, it's restaurants, it's delivery companies. And so our role is about more than just sustenance, and our focus going forward is about how we deliver more in the arenas of health, indulgence, time-saving and convenience, and in entertaining. So our focus now is very much about thinking not just about share of trade, but about share of stomach, and how we're going to be increasing the level of service that we provide to our customers and the level of convenience we provide in store in order to compete with a much wider competitive set than we've looked at in the past. To think about the relevance, the convenience, the freshness, the tastiness, the healthiness of our products, and then backing that up with the trust, the traceability, and the sustainability that we believe Spinneys can do a better job of than some of those other competitors. It is still going to be about bricks and mortar. We've launched online, but 90% of our sales are still in store. And that is a similar trend that you see across most food retailers worldwide. But retailers got to become, in a bricks and mortar environment, more experiential and more service focused. We've also got a price war going on, and we will be doing our very best to avoid that by keeping ourselves as distant from the competition, by having different brands, by having more private label, by having more exclusive, so that the comparatives are more difficult for customers to make. And from a .com perspective, the plan is very much about avoiding what is rapidly becoming a race to the bottom and looking at how the .com world becomes one of upgraded convenience and service. And it's going to be about a race for time rather than for cheap products. The final thing for us is about de-risking our saturation. We're a premium retailer. That gives us a limited scale in terms of the customers that we can look to. And so new markets beyond the borders of the UAE is certainly something that you should be seeing from Spinneys in the next 5 years. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot, Tom. We'll come to the questions after Ashish's presentation as well. So Ashish, tell us more about what your plan of action for Jacky's is.
Sure, thank you. And that's a tough act to follow. Nothing changes. Nothing changes in the next 5 years, because as a retailer, nothing has changed as well. In retail, we've always been about one thing, and that is about being where the customer is and serving the customer. And that's all we continue to do. Now, the customer's moved, and our job as a retailer is to continue moving with them at the end of the day. We've seen the customers move from stores. We've seen them move online. The electronics sector was probably fortunate because a lot of people started moving online a lot quicker. So we've been through generation 1, 2, 3 by now and understood a lot of that. And when they started moving online, it went to individual e-commerce stores, and then it started moving into marketplaces and other places. And for us, it was the same thing as well. We had to be where the customer was. Now, when we think forwards in the next 5 years, we're going to continue to see this evolution over here because retail hasn't died. The online space hasn't died. The marketplaces aren't going to die. But we're going to see the metaverse, and we're going to see what's going to come out with the metaverse as well going forward. And it's a question of us now starting to move over there. The one thing that we hope maybe gets better is how we get that same experience everywhere. Because that consistency of experiences is one of the things that has to evolve. You can buy a television in the store because you can see the picture quality between the different televisions. Online, you really can't see the picture quality difference. In the metaverse, hopefully we get to start to see that and we start to get to experience that. And I think this is a lot of what it is coming down to, is trying to get that experience over there. But it's not only just about the sale, it's then about the entire journey that happens in over there. The role of the store has changed. The store was where you sold from, to where it became the distribution point, to where it's now becoming the service point as well. Because in the electronics industry and in technology, it's also been about the service part of it. So we've seen the evolution in terms of what the store has become and where it's moved. But again, at the heart of it is still the customer and what we need to do for the customer and the customer experience.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ashish and Tom. And now I'm going to open the floor to our experts here on the panel. So can I start with you, Hozefa? Do you have a question for Ashish and Tom?
You said 90% of the sale is still happening inside the store. And everybody's talking about the jump over e-commerce and online platforms. Question is it that you have lost the customers that go online? Or is that your expansion has already incorporated those online customers?
For us, we've definitely gained additional customers from moving into online. It has been a decision to move into online that took a very, very long time, a discussion point at board for probably the last 10 years. And what COVID did for us was solidify there's an absolute need. There are customers who are not shopping with us because we weren't providing the convenient solution. So we had to do it. It's a case of if you don't do it, you will die. But we need to make sure that we then do our .com in a way that is sustainable for the future. A supermarket is set up as a self-service operation. We do our best to have a few staff in a store and let the customers pick product up. When I've got to pay somebody to do that for a customer, it becomes more expensive, and that's why we need to look at how we actually develop that .com business into something where there are greater values that are added to the customer service than just bringing it to your home, about bringing it quickly and getting into not just the 1 hour or the 1.5 hour that Daniel were talking about in an earlier session, but the race that we're seeing in other countries now where it's about 10 minutes from order to your doorstep.
Right, thank you.
Convinced, Hozefa?
If I can address that point as well, though I'm not from Spinneys, but when you're shopping, and it's the whole experience of where you shop at, it's the experience you get when you shop as well. The experience of walking into Spinneys and walking out of there and knowing that you picked up and you've seen the produce and it's merchandised in a certain way is something that is very, very good and something they do extremely well. And I would agree with Tom, if you're going to move online, you want to make sure that experience carries over as well. There is a Spinneys experience, and I think it's one of the things that a lot of people look at is when COVID came in, they said, let's jump online and let's get on there as quick as we can. But the brand values don't move online as well as easily. And if you're going to do it, it's better to do it well than to rush and do it and do a bad job, because that's going to tarnish the brand more in the long term.
Absolutely.
Great. Mohammad Alawi, do you have a question?
Yes, my question is to Mr. Ashish. During the lockdown and even after the lockdown of the COVID, could you tell us more about the trend of spending? What type of product people are spending more and less? Is it on the gaming because they are stuck in the house? Or I'll give you an example. When you go to the tobacco sector, their sales hit the rock because people have been sitting in the home. So tell us more about spending patterns, and are all of them on the cash or loans? How they spend it, especially with the pressure happening on some of the people income.
So yeah, good question. Our problem has been supply, not demand at this stage, and thankfully so. But what they've been buying has also changed and evolved over the period. When the lockdown was coming in, it was a lot about e-learning and work from home and the devices that you needed for that. So it was laptops, it was tablets, it was printers, it was scanners, it was a lot of those peripheral devices that you needed to work at home. And then it became about entertainment at home, which is when the PlayStations, the televisions, and everything else started to happen. And you started to see that upgrade in terms of what happened. And it became about what the home was about. The home then became about not only where you live, but where you work, where you learn, where you exercise, where you entertain. And we've seen the nature of all of that start to change and the importance that the house had. As all of us over here living have probably seen, we've seen the real estate sector jump, and we've seen that transformation happen. And suddenly then it became about the white goods and the appliances as well, and the demand that started to come in as people started to upgrade what they had all over the house. So we've literally seen every segment grow. One segment that a lot of people said initially wouldn't or would suffer would be the smartphone segment, because people were at home. Why do they need new smartphones? And we saw a bit of a dip in the beginning, but we've seen it bounce back so strongly because, again, you're doing so many things at home, and the phone has now become sort of central to everyone, and everything you do is on there. And then it all became about the experience of that. And the brands have done a fantastic job. Samsung, Apple, and brands like that have come out with some really, really interesting and innovative products. And like I said, our bigger challenge has been in the last 2 years has been about supply chain. We just cannot get enough stock. If we had more, we could sell more. It's a good problem to have right now.
And that's not getting any easier, is it?
Yeah.
Again, like he said, that's a great problem to have. Anurag, your question, please.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Great to hear your thoughts. I have a question for both of you, but Tom, I'll you. You spoke about your focus on service, convenience, relevance to the customer, all very valid things to focus on. How are you using data to sort of fuel your business, right? Everybody talks about use of data, use of technology, data being the new oil. What changes are you bringing into your business to put this into action?
Despite the fact that we do not operate a loyalty system, which I know everybody thinks is a superb source of data, there is an enormous amount of other information that we have. Our EPOS gives me a very clear sense of how many dirhams are going through the till every single morning, in fact, every single hour if I require it, so we can see rapidly what is changing, how consumer habits are changing, and allows us to make very rapid decisions. We're fortunate that we're not the biggest retailer in the world by any stretch of the imagination, and we're a small enough business that we can still react very, very quickly. There are other things that we have in terms of information that we have at our fingertips. Whilst we are not recording with cameras and microphones every single conversation going in the stores, we do have solutions that allow us to map how customers move through the stores and understand where are the key touch points and are we actually laying out our stores in the right way. But the data that we've got is making a huge impact on how we change and how we see that the behaviors, to exactly what Ashish is saying, have started to change now that we're into the post-COVID world. The fact that people are moving back into a much more normal habit back at work. And we can see that in terms of how many bakery items we're selling in the morning and the size of the transaction, or the number of items that we're selling at a lunchtime, and make some very good assumptions on the fact that that lunchtime mission is driven by people being back in the office and not working from home in the volumes that they were before.
So data is an interesting one, because I think what's happened is in the last 2 years, we've learned a lot more in terms of where the gap between where the online world was and where pure physical retail was. The big difference was data. The online guys always had the access to data and had a lot better data than us. And it wasn't because physical retailers weren't trying. It was because you need the customer to be on side with you, and you need your own employees to be on side with you if you want to start to capture more data. And we've seen that transition happen. The fact that you started scanning a QR code on a menu meant you started engaging digitally with the restaurant that you went to. The fact that you would walk into McDonald's and they would renovate every McDonald's one by one. When they had kiosks in there before COVID, no one ever would touch the kiosk. Everyone went to the counter. But then when McDonald's suddenly started renovating the stores and there was only 2 counters and 6 kiosks, you had a question in your mind: do I wait in line for 15 minutes or do I go to the kiosk? The moment you start to go to the kiosk, you start to see the change forced upon the consumer, and they're embracing that change and starting to understand that they can work with you a little differently. And that for us is what we needed in physical retail, is we needed the customer to change in the way they interacted with us. And that has been the one big thing that's come in, because the moment they start to do that, you can start to work a lot more with them. The moment you can say, I will email you an invoice, instead of giving you a physical printout, gives you data. And you start to then work from that and build from that. And then, whether it's a customer now who's online and they come into the store, they're willing to engage with you in a lot more in the same way because they have the same expectation as well. And I think that's the one big advantage and the one big benefit that came in. And coming down to another area that's, I think, changed a lot in this period has been loyalty. And the whole concept of loyalty. We have seen customers change in terms of their purchase patterns, and they were willing to try a lot more and experiment and go with brands that they haven't been with earlier. What was interesting is we also saw a lot of retailers change their loyalty strategy. And most of them stopped being loyal to their own loyalty program because they started to realize if you start to work with other loyalty programs as well, you start to get the benefit of the data that you get from those loyalty programs as well. And that's a lot more richer, and I think we're starting to see that benefit come in everywhere.
Great, thank you. Hozefa, Mohammad, and Anurag, you have one more round at asking questions. But before that, from the jury who couldn't make it today, unfortunately. I do have questions from them as well. One is Laila Muhammad Suhail from DTCM. So her question is, how can retailers capitalize on holiday seasons, festivals like DSF, DSS, etc., beyond just discounts and big baskets and sales? I'll leave this for you to decide who wants to take this.
You go first.
Yeah, so I think electronics was one of those categories that was very, very promotion-driven, very tactical, and I think it was unhealthy at one stage in time because we were always on sale. And then the customer starts to value what is the concept of the sale and what's a genuine sale and what isn't a genuine sale. Now, a lot of that was because there was a lot more supply than there was demand. And we were sort of prostituting ourselves, if that's the right way, in terms of getting sales in, by doing whatever it was in terms of promotions. I think now we're in a much better position because when you're in a position where you've got the demand and you're trying to get the supply in there, you now start to look at how do I build genuine demand and actually do genuine activities and promotions and actually add value in the right way. It isn't about discounts anymore, and I think we've all understood and learned that. So definitely the nature of that has been there. I think the retail calendar as well had gotten a lot more crowded a couple of years ago. We're starting to see some breathing room finally. I think everyone has understood and realized that whether it was the mall operators, whether it was departments like DTCM, etc., and we're starting to see that spacing out start to happen. And not every promotion is for every retailer. I think this is the one thing that also came out is when you see the Dubai promotion calendar and you look at it and you say there are 27 different activities being planned in the year, you maybe participate in 6, and you pick the 6 most relevant ones, and you don't necessarily have to be at everything.
Great. One more question from our jury, Kalika Tripathi from Visa. Tom, if you'd like to take this. A confluence of structural shifts, including experiential stores, event-centric retail, and shift to e-commerce is great from an experience creation standpoint, but it is challenging a retailer's revenue. How to ensure profitability and business sustenance?
Well, I think that comes to what some of the bits I'd said earlier. So, I mean, e-commerce is a massive challenge, and Ashish also mentioned that particularly when you're trying to be in a more premium sector, the more you move into .com, the more actually the experience is lost in a digital world. And that's why it's even more important for us to make sure our stores are even more experiential. .com is expensive, particularly in food grocery. You've still got to have stock on a shelf, whether it's in a dark store or in a supermarket. But fresh products, they're much more fragile, and it is a challenge. That's where I believe that the world of digital actually becomes about, rather than taking the route of some retailers across the world who seem to be solely focused on making things the cheapest possible item. It's about actually creating digital into a value-added service, and it's about that focus on speed, or it's about a focus on something else that is actually going to mean that the conversation is about something other than just price, because there is not going to be a sustainable future for any retailer if the only thing that everybody is doing is worrying about the selling price.
Great. Any more questions from our jury? Hozefa, yes.
Thank you. I have a question each for you, Tom and Ashish. So first, let me begin with Tom. Tom, we are talking about redefining the customer experience inside the store. You spoke about customer being more independent and wanting to have a fairly different experience. They want to feel empowered when they're making that journey. In other markets and more matured markets, we have seen adoption of personal shopping systems. We have seen some sort of deployments in this market, but not really to the extent that we see in mainland Europe or, let's say, back in United States. What's your view on personal shopping system, specifically for food retail in this market?
I think it's got a place in parts of food retail, but a lot of it is going to come down to the individual customer and their personal preferences. Now, I'll give you an example. We've got a diverse audience in this room, and even within retail in the UK, where I was working for a long time as a meat buyer, when you're looking after primarily the UK population, one nationality, one culture, people's preferences on meat, on an individual steak, can be extremely different. My wife will be looking for the leanest possible piece. I'm looking for one that's got the most fat and marbling in because I want to throw it on the barbecue and it to be beautiful. Unless your personal shopper has got that level of intimate knowledge of what you want in your food preferences, which probably means they're living with you and are therefore actually your husband or your wife, it can be challenging. In the more generic products where you're looking at a brand, if it's, like, go out and please buy my Clorox and my toilet paper and whatever I need from the multinational brands, dead easy. But with some of the fresh food products, I think it can be a real challenge down to that level of personal difference and preference.
Sure, I understand. It makes sense, absolute sense, Tom. And I think that's where we would want to correlate to what Anurag said, is the utilization of the data. Once you have the buying patterns, preferences of individual shoppers inside your store, then somehow that could be linked back to the choices that they make inside the store. But thank you for your view. Yes, this is a culturally diverse market, so more difficult to look at. Ashish, question to you. You have spoken about consumers adopting different channels to approach their buying decision. It used to be inside the store, then it is online. Now it is mixed of online and inside the store experience. Doesn't that put a pressure on the preparedness of your store associates to now manage expectation of the customer who walks in, who is more informed? How do they prepare themselves, or how do you as a retailer prepare your staff to deal with this new consumer?
Great question. I think one of the big things that we've seen over here, and one of the big advantages we've got being in the UAE, is we have got a relatively young population, and a population that's willing to adapt and willing to learn and willing to move. And the one big thing that came out of COVID was we all learned to think like consumers a lot more, even with the people that worked with us, because no one wanted to be in a store longer than they had to be. Everyone wanted to be in and out. There was things about efficiency, there was things about hygiene, there was things about service. All these things sort of came out over there. So I think the empathy that the store associate has got is actually there with the consumer today, and they've learned to appreciate that. And the fact is, it's actually become a lot easier to recruit people now who are better trained because they've actually come from other markets as well. And the other markets that we recruit from have also improved in terms of the quality and in terms of the expectation. So the challenge for electronics retail a couple of years ago used to be, where could we recruit from? And we would have to recruit people from bigger cities, if they were from the subcontinent, because they could still talk the lingo, they could still understand, they were still a little more literate in terms of technology and its application. And today you're finding that's a lot more widespread. Today or I'll give you an example. 15 years ago, we started the concept of selling extended warranties over here. We tied up with AIG Insurance. It was their entry into the Middle East, and we launched with them in a month. That was the quickest ever implementation of extended warranty sales anywhere in the world. We had to bring in trainers from the UK to train our staff in terms of how to sell extended warranties. And they didn't come in once. They came in 3 or 4 times repeatedly over the space of 6 months to get them there, to get past the objection handling, get past the different areas. Fast forward today, we're recruiting staff who've come in from all parts of the world, whether the Philippines, whether Sri Lanka, whether the Indian subcontinent, whether even parts of Africa. And they've already understood the concept of extended warranty because they've been selling it in their countries. So the acceptance is there with them, and the knowledge is there. So people are actually a lot better in terms of what we're getting. And the fact that we get more younger people coming in over here has actually made our life a lot easier in that sense.
So Ashish, maybe, and this is a question for both of you, but maybe it's a segue to what you've just answered, right? So, people call the pandemic the great disruption. We've seen the war on talent. We've seen, getting the right people being reskilled. How are both of you seeing this play out in your business? So when you look at your hiring strategy, your people strategy over the next 2 or 3 years, what's evolving? And so first, what are the current challenges that you're facing, and how do you see it evolve over the next few years?
Well,
For us, in terms of our people strategy, there is absolutely no change. And we are certainly not having any trouble in recruiting. In fact, our problem is probably trying to keep people from stopping constantly applying and just beating down our door and filling up the reception when we're trying to have our suppliers coming in. Yeah, we don't have a problem. But our policies are very simple in terms of people do not come in at a senior level into the organization. Everybody starts pretty low. My chief executive, my boss, started stacking the shelves 25 years ago. Every single one of our store managers and our regional managers started on the shop floor and moves up. That has always been the way, and so generally our focus is on more blue-collar labor force that actually we then take the top 10% that come through, but they're already in the business, the talent, and that's where we bring our expansion from.
So I would put it a little differently from our end. A lot of our strategy is actually driven by the people working with us today. So with the businesses that we run, and some of my business heads are here as well, they've actually put together a 3-year business plan, driven by them, designed by them, and executed with the teams that they put together. And this is feedback that they see, and what they see is their business and their journey in terms of how they drive that over there. When you've got that ownership at that level, you start to see things change and you start to see things evolve. It's not then about us versus them. It's about everyone moving in the same direction and getting that direction in place. And I think this is the one big thing that came out. E-commerce is a fantastic example, and I hate the word omni-channel. I said it well before COVID, and I've said it at every panel I've been on. Omni-channel for me was never the right word for this business. It was all about retail at the end of the day. We're selling through different channels, but it's all retailing at the end of the day. And most people who said they had an omni-channel strategy had 2 teams. They had an online team and they had a physical retail team, and the 2 barely spoke to each other. We're actually at an age now where the 2 have had to come together, and the 2 are working together, and it's true retailing happening over there. So that omni-channel story was rubbish. I mean, it was there to make people happy, but it didn't actually unite businesses in the way it should have.
I have the same question also for the 2 gentlemen. With the increased pressure on the margin in the business, with the increased cost of the operations, I would like to hear about the way forward for your investment, prioritize for investment. Is it in store, online? Is it the big scale sales? How are you going to prioritize your investment in the future? Second is where the cutting the cost going to be happening.
So I'll answer first. So I think within us, we decided quite consciously many years ago to make changes in the way we ran our business. We knew what store size worked for us better. And we worked on that store size of between 2,000 to 3,000, 2,000 to 5,000 square feet, and we said, that's the ideal store size for us. Many others were going bigger. We said, it's unsustainable. You can't do that. So we actually shrunk a lot of our store sizes many years ago, and did that quite consciously. And it was also about volume and making sure you had the right volume, because you can reach the customer through other channels as well, which is where online and all of that came in. And like I said, electronics was probably better placed than most industries, because we were on version 2 or 3 of our online strategy by the time COVID came in. So we had started the outreach, because the first thing any online retailer does is they start selling mobiles and laptops, because that's the easiest thing for them to sell. So we had that competition with us already. And it's then about being selective in terms of the brands you work with, in terms of doing volume, and it's about having that partnership in place. The other major factor was our landlords, and trying to get the landlords to work with you was difficult, was extremely difficult, because it has to be a win-win. And I think The UAE landlords were in that win-win story with you in the early 2000s, and then it moved into win-lose, where the retailer was losing out at that stage. And I think COVID has helped reset a lot of that relationship in that dialogue, in that discussion, because they realized very quickly you need the retailer to be sustainable, because when you lose a quality retailer in a mall and you start to lose a couple of them, you're not getting another quality retailer to replace him. You're getting someone of a lower quality to come in and replace him. And then that's the entire image of the mall that starts to slowly degrade and come down. And I think they've recognized that. And it's better to maintain the quality, but then to try and find a way of making it a win-win discussion.
So I think for us, I'll look at some of the challenges, the cost of freight, the inflation. These are global challenges, and they're going to get worse. I was in the States last week, driving past a great big warehouse for CVS Pharmacy, $18 an hour for warehouse floor workers. Every truck on the freeway with us, come and work for us. They are throwing money at people. They need people. This is going to flow through to us as well. And we're already seeing it in freight. So global challenges, for me, they're going to hit everybody in a fairly equal measure. And I think one of the things that's, from a Spinneys perspective, we remain very mindful of is what is it that is driving those customers to us? We are fortunate in that we are serving a more affluent part of the community than some of our competitors. And what we are seeing in other parts of the market is the way that people are mitigating these increases in cost is by decreasing their quality, by taking a second-grade product. I am absolutely confident that my customers will not forgive me if we do that. And we have to stick true to those principles that have got us through 60 years, almost to the day, about having the best quality product on the market, and think about what we're doing, not just about how we manage this to get through a little blip, which may be a blip of a couple of years, but think about what the impact of compromising on one of those most intrinsic of our brand values would be for 5, 10, 15, and 20 years down the line if we go and cheat the customer by trying to cut quality to manage costs.
I have one other question for you, Tom. Private label future. I would like to hear your thought. Private label future with the primary grocery brand. Private label future with the chain of supply disasters. Private label futures with the big player on the market from the e-commerce, Amazon.com and all the things.
Private label is another area that actually sort of links in with the previous question on how to manage cost. It's absolutely massive. We have significantly strengthened the team within Spinneys. I've got just over 1,100 private label products under development at the moment, and an expectation that the sales participation of private label within our group will double within the next 3 years. Private label is going to become massively important. It's about that actually diversifying away. It is better in terms of managing cost. It's also better in terms of managing your price assortment, because you need to be less worried about having so many products that are competing on price against your competitors if you've got a smaller assortment of that and a greater proportion of private label. It also allows you to make much more of showcasing your own brand values and be much more about how you bring that experience even into a digital world than it does if you're just displaying a whole load of P&G or Unilever products on your shelves the same as everybody else. But it's absolutely massive. And it's not, we are significantly underdeveloped in this market versus some of the more established. I can see it growing even more in parts of Europe, but I think in this region it is going to become very, very significant very, very quickly.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Tom and Ashish. I'm not sure about you, but this reminds me of a presidential debate sort of format. So are we saying Tom for president? Or Ashish for president as well?
We're on the same side.
Great, thank you so much for those insights, and thanks for letting our jury grill you a little bit here on stage, and thanks for sharing all of those candid views and opinions about the plan of action for your respective companies. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Over to you, Lee.
Thank you, Tom and Ashish. Vote Tom, hey? We could start something here, couldn't we?